There is a crow in the alley behind the building, and you almost missed it. Not because it was hiding, because you were not expecting anything worth watching. It was pulling apart a paper bag near the base of a dumpster, methodical, unhurried. And when a pigeon wandered too close, it stopped, looked at the pigeon, waited, then went back to the bag as if nothing had happened. You walked on. You assumed you had seen the whole thing. You had not seen anything yet. What crows do when no human appears to be watching turns out to be one of the most unsettling discoveries in modern animal cognition. Not because it is dramatic, it rarely looks dramatic from the outside, but because what it implies about the interior life of these birds lands with the specific weight of a fact you cannot unfeel once you know it. Right now, at this moment, crows in every city on this planet are engaged in behaviors they actively suppress in the presence of observers. They are hiding food from each other using deception strategies, so layered they require holding multiple competing mental models simultaneously: yours, theirs, a third crow's. If you have ever assumed that the difference between a bird and a mind was obvious, this will make that assumption feel very thin. Subscribe if the edges of that kind of thing interest you. The first laboratory evidence came from Cambridge, where behavioral ecologist Nicola Clayton designed a series of experiments with western scrub jays, corvids closely related to crows, in the early 2000s. The setup was simple. A jay was allowed to cache food while another jay watched. Then the watcher was removed. What happened next took years to fully interpret. The caching bird returned not to eat but to move the food, to rebury it somewhere the observer had not seen. But here is what Clayton's team discovered when they looked closer. This recaching behavior only occurred in birds that had themselves stolen food from others in the past. Jays with no history of theft did not bother. The birds that knew what it meant to be a thief were the ones who assumed they were being watched even when they were not. They were projecting their own experience onto another mind. Most people assume deception in animals is instinct, a fixed behavior, like camouflage, that runs automatically. The reality is structurally different, and the difference matters. What Clayton's experiments revealed is that corvid deception is contingent. It changes based on who was watching, how long they watched, and whether the observer could see the specific location of the cache or only the general area. A crow does not run a single deception program. It runs several simultaneously, updating them as conditions change. Researchers at the University of Vienna later confirmed this flexibility in carrion crows, showing that the birds altered their caching strategies based not just on whether they were observed, but on the apparent attentiveness of the observer. A crow can tell the difference between a rival that looked away briefly and a rival that genuinely did not see where the food went. And it behaves differently in each case. There is a word for what that requires. The word is theory of mind. The scale of what that implies takes a moment to absorb. Theory of mind, the ability to model the mental states of others, to understand that another being has a perspective different from your own, was considered for decades a uniquely human capacity. Then, reluctantly, it was extended to great apes. The corvid data forced a second revision. What these birds demonstrate in controlled conditions is not approximate or marginal. A 2020 study published in the journal Science found that Eurasian jays could pass versions of the classic false belief task, the same cognitive test used to identify theory of mind in human children, at a level comparable to 4-year-old humans. The crow in your alley is operating, in some measurable sense, with a social intelligence that took our own lineage millions of years to develop. It arrived there by an entirely different road, and that is where the real strangeness lives, not in what crows can do, but in what it means that something so distant from us got to the same place. Convergent evolution of cognition. The same cognitive pressure, the need to navigate complex social relationships, to model rivals, to plan and deceive and reconsider, producing similar architecture in brains that share almost no structural history with ours. The crow is not a lesser version of anything. It is a separate solution to the problem of being alive in a world full of other minds. So go back to that alley. Go back to the bird pulling apart the bag, looking unhurried and indifferent. It knew you were there. It was making calculations you were not aware of, and when you left, something changed. Tell me in the comments, have you ever caught a crow doing something that felt deliberate in a way you couldn't explain? I read everyone. You were never just an observer. You were always a variable.